I knew we would get to cocktails sooner or later, and I'm glad that it's sooner. But instead of trying to cover everything about cocktails all at once, I'm going to focus on tools. The tools that you need if you're trying to set up a home bar. Specifically, I'm going to talk about some of my favorites. We're going to start with a jigger. You've probably seen or own a jigger that looks like this. This is pretty classic. It's usually 2 ounces on this side, 1 ounce on this side. This specific one I bought when I was living in Prague at IKEA, so this one's actually metric. It's 56 and 28 milliliters, but it's still 2 to 1. The problem with this one is that it doesn't have any lines on the inside, so you can't tell any other measurements really well other than 2 or 1. So you can upgrade to something like this, which is a jigger I really, really love. It's beautiful. I think it's made in Japan. It's really heavy, and it has all these great lines on the inside. So again, it's 2 to 1, but it has a line on the inside, on the big side, to show you where 1.5 is. And then on the other side, it has lines to show you where 3/4, half, and 1/4 are. And while I really love it, I love how this feels in my hand. These are really made for using in bars. And the reason it has the line all the way around the inside is that when you're pouring, you don't have to put it down to tell when you've hit that line. You balance the jigger until it evenly touches that line, and then you know. And the other thing is that 2 ounces and 1 ounce are right to the top. You really run into the problem of maybe spilling when you're using this at home. And if you use one side and then the other, it's just a little messier when you don't have a drip tray, when you don't have all that stuff. You might at home, but I find these, as much as I love them, I don't end up using them. What's my favorite jigger is this thing, which is an OXO. It's got these measures that you can see from the top down on the inside. So when you have it on the counter, you can pour it in and see what measurement you're at. These also come in plastic versions. This is my pick for using at home. It doesn't have the 2 sides. I can see from the top down. I don't have to look at awkwardly from the side. Yeah, it just works really well. Now that you have your jigger, you need something to actually mix your drink in. So for stirred drinks, I have this Yarai mixing glass. You definitely don't need something like this, but what I would recommend getting for stirred drinks is something that doesn't have a seam on the inside, and doesn't have any sort of texture. That's what's great about this, because when you're mixing, and I'll get to spoons in a minute, but when you're mixing and running your spoon around the inside, you're not hitting any bumps or seams. It's just more comfortable. There are some knockoff, cheaper versions of these that I believe usually do have a seam. They're made of 2 pieces of glass. You could mix in a pint glass or in a shaker. Then you're also going to need some kind of shaker. This is a traditional 3-piece shaker, although this one's copper. If you have a 3-piece shaker like this, it's great. You know, it has the strainer built into it, but lately I've been using a Boston shaker more. The great thing about these is that they're not too expensive. You can use them for shaken drinks. You could use one side for stirred drinks. This is probably all you would need. Then when it comes to straining, you need to strain both your stirred and your shaken drinks. There's your more typical traditional Hawthorne strainer, which has this kind of spring-loaded part, which fits really nicely into this mixing glass. But I actually prefer what's called a julep strainer, partially because it looks kind of cool. But what I like is I fill my glass when I'm stirring a drink. I fill my glass pretty high with ice, and as I stir, the ice level goes down a little bit. And then, even though a lot of people I've seen put this in this way, I actually put it in this way, and then it kind of pushes down on the ice, and then I hold it like this as I pour the drink. These don't tend to be too expensive either. Any kind of strainer that works for you. I think the big thing is that it fits into the glass really well. That's really important. Okay, moving on to bar spoons. This bar spoon I've had for a really long time. It has this heavy end, which is good for, you can crack ice with it. If you're muddling something delicate like mint leaves or something like that, that you don't want to muddle too much because they'll get bitter, you can just kind of tamp it down with that. But on the whole, I don't love this spoon. It's just a little big when I'm mixing. It doesn't feel as good in the fingers. This is a bar spoon I do really love. The way to stir is that the outside of the spoon is always in contact with the glass, so it's kind of spinning between your second and your third finger. I'll probably do more on technique at some point, but this one just feels so nice when that's happening. It just feels really natural. It feels really smooth. I really recommend this. Again, a bit more expensive. Another good spoon option is this from thestandardspoon.com. This is probably my second favorite. Depending on the kinds of drinks you're making, you'll probably want a muddler as well. I like this kind of heavy wooden thing to use. This one's from kegworks.com, which is, I think, a US-based company, but you can find them, I think, more readily these days. I like it for muddling, obviously, but also because it's nice and heavy, you can use it if you need to crush ice. You can put a bunch of ice in a freezer Ziploc bag, crush it till it's at like small or pebble size, and then use it for something like a mint julep or those kinds of things. You can use a rolling pin if you need to crush ice. Then I'll talk about ice as well. It's actually interesting that the ice that you make at home in your freezer is probably better than the ice you'll find in a standard restaurant, unless it's a bar that really is devoted to cocktails and those kinds of things. They probably won't have great ice. They'll have ice that melts too quickly and dilutes drinks too much. If you want some really nice cubes, I really like these Tovolo trays. This is the smaller size, and this is, I think these are called the King Cube. And they make really nice big cubes if you're making like an old fashioned or something that's supposed to be on the rocks, or you can crack it up into smaller pieces. But these are really, really good. I wanted to talk a little bit about bitters. Oh, I gotta change my battery. Be right back. The first bitters I would recommend getting are these. You've probably seen them. They're called Angostura bitters. They're an aromatic bitters from Trinidad and Tobago. And these are pretty common. You can get them at grocery stores, supermarkets, things like that. Peychaud's is another bitters that you've maybe heard of. It's another classic old school bitters. If you don't think you're going to be making a Sazerac, or if you don't like the taste of anise or black licorice or those kinds of things, this probably isn't as crucial as Angostura, which I think you should definitely get. There's a lot of other uses for this. It's great in some Manhattan variations and some old fashions and things like that. It plays well with a lot of different kinds of spirits, but it does have a much more pronounced specific taste. I think that a much better second bitters is an orange flavored bitter. So you can get Angostura orange, which is great, or something like Regan's, which is a bit more spiced. It's also really nice. Just get one to start. I'd probably go with the Angostura. It's a little more neutral, a little more friendly in a lot of drinks. After that, I would probably recommend Boker's bitters, which is another old school bitter. The Martinez is probably the most famous drink that it's used in, but I just find that they work with so many things. But another great option is to get something like this, which is the Bitter Truth Traveler Set, because you really don't use a lot of bitters at a time. This had their aromatic bitters, so their version of Angostura, their decanter bitters, which I'd say maybe are a little more like a Boker's. They have their orange bitters. They have a Creole bitters, which is like Peychaud's. And then there's a celery bitters in here, which I don't use as much, but it's good in gin drinks. You can put it in a Bloody Mary or Bloody Caesar. It's great in those things. And then just to show a different one, there's the Scrappy's bitters version. This one has orange aromatic Orleans, which is their version of Peychaud's, and then celery. Either just get Angostura to start or get a little traveler set like that. For garnishes, I would recommend a Y peeler. There's this one, which is sort of a cheapo version. I also have this OXO, surprise, surprise, that I really like. I just find these much easier to peel with when you're doing that versus kind of this kind of peeler. I find that a little more awkward. You don't have as much control. If you're looking for any of these tools, I recommend using thecraftybartender.com. Full disclosure, I know Donna and Kennedy, who own and run that site, a little bit. They didn't ask me to mention them, or I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just like them and I like their site. So I think that's about it for tools. Those are the basics. And as a little bonus, I thought I'd mention a few books that I like. First one is the PDT cocktail book, which is from Please Don't Tell in New York. And what I like about this is that it's mostly recipes in alphabetical order. It's got a really good index. And what I found with cocktail books over the years is that while some are really beautiful and have really amazing recipes and beautiful photography, they're not fantastically usable. They're broken into sections either by spirit or by themes. And they may not have a great index that cross-references all those things. So if you're looking for something, it may not be easy to find. Pretty much all the recipes are great in here. This one's hard to go wrong with. The second one is the Bar Book by Jeffrey Morgenthaler. This is more about ingredients and technique. It has some recipes in it as well. If you just wanted to learn about making cocktails, the Bar Book by Jeff Morgenthaler is fantastic. If you wanted to go a little deeper, Sasha Petrasky wrote this amazingly beautiful book called Regarding Cocktails. It's lovely. I really love this book. It's got great recipes in it. The writing is fantastic. This goes a little bit deeper into some things, but I would recommend that one next. And then there's Ian's Bartender Manual, which is pretty new and also goes quite deep into things, but it's another great book. As you can see, I've been using it. And then if you want to go super deep, there's this, written by a Japanese bartender. This gets pretty deep into some techniques and the way that they do things in Japan. It's so meticulous and precise. If you want to get better at some of this stuff or just read about another perspective, I really recommend Cocktail Technique. I hope this was interesting. I hope this was useful to you. If you have other things you'd like to learn about regarding cocktails and preparation of drinks, anything like that, let me know. I'd love to do some more of these. You give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. See you next time.